I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just stood there with my hand on my cheek where the sting still lingered and stared at the man who raised me. My father, Raymond Carter, stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes blazing, like I had just committed some unspeakable betrayal. His words still echoed in the air, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're ungrateful. Get out, and don't you ever come back." That was it. No warning, no discussion. Just that. Behind him, the lights in the kitchen flickered, as if unsure whether to stay or go, mirroring the moment I now found myself in. The room still smelled faintly of roast chicken and cigarette smoke. It was supposed to be a peaceful holiday dinner. I had driven 4 hours from Boston to come home carrying gifts, groceries, even a new recliner I had saved up for something I thought he'd like. But none of that mattered. None of it ever really did. I was 28, standing in the house I grew up in, yet it felt like I had never truly belonged. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Any word would have either turned into an argument or been dismissed like so many times before. I walked past him, slowly brushed by the chipped edge of the counter where my mother used to rest her coffee cup, and picked up my coat. No one stopped me. No one said my name. The house, once deafening with demands and criticisms, was suddenly silent, as if it had finally gotten what it wanted. Outside, the night air was cold, sharp, almost cleansing. I didn't look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and let the hum drown out the chaos I had just left behind. As I drove away, my mind didn't spiral. It didn't replay the slap or the shouting. It locked onto one single truth that had been building for years but had never spoken out loud. This wasn't love. This was power. And I had finally refused to play along. I had brought peace offerings. I had hoped somewhere deep down that things would be different this time, that maybe years of hard work, independence, and quiet sacrifice would be enough to earn some kind of recognition. But all I got was a hand across my face and a door slammed shut behind me. The strangest part, I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even shocked. I was relieved, because now there was no more pretending. No more walking on eggshells, no more wishing, just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt like freedom. My name is Madison Carter. I'm 28 years old, an interior designer living in Boston. I specialize in small spaces, tiny apartments, old brownstones, the kind of homes that most people give up on. I like to find the beauty in things others think are too broken to fix. Maybe because for the longest time I thought that was my job with people too. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind of town where everyone knows each other's business, and Sunday church is less about faith and more about reputation. My father, Raymond Carter, is a retired Navy man, rigid, proud, stuck in a decade that ended long before I was born. He runs a local hardware store, now still wears his uniform to Veterans Day parades, still sharpens his kitchen knives with military precision. He believes in respect, in obedience, and in silence. Especially silence. My mother died when I was 14. Cancer. Quick and cruel. After she was gone, the house changed. Not physically, though. Her pictures disappeared slowly, as if grief demanded erasure, but emotionally. The warmth left, the laughter left. What remained was rules, expectations, and punishment. My father didn't believe in therapy or grief. He believed in routine. Get up, get dressed, get over it. That was how he mourned. That was how he raised me. I became efficient, capable, quiet. I got good grades because it kept him off my back. I never missed curfew, because the one time I did, he locked the door and left me outside all night. I learned not to cry in front of him. Not because he hit me often, though there were moments, but because emotion was weakness, and weakness was shameful. By the time I turned 18, I had already lived 1,000 lives inside my head. I wanted to go to art school. I loved colors, textures, spaces that made people feel something. But he called it a waste of time, said no daughter of his would be a starving artist. He pushed for engineering. Something useful, something respectable. I compromised. took online design courses while working 2 jobs, lied about my classes, said I was taking accounting. He never checked, never asked. As long as I didn't cause trouble, he didn't care where I went. I moved to Boston on a scholarship I earned without telling him. I packed my bags while he was at work and left a note on the kitchen table. He didn't call. Not that day, not that week, not even that month. I built a life on my own, rented a room in a noisy apartment, worked evenings at a bookstore, freelanced on the side. I kept sending money home, out of guilt, out of duty, out of hope. Hope that one day he'd see me not as the girl who left, but as the woman who survived. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, if I succeeded loudly enough, he'd be proud. But pride in our house was reserved for silence and submission. The more independent I became, the more he saw it as rebellion. Even as I brought groceries home during holidays, even as I bought him a new chair, because the old one squeaked too much, even as I asked him how he was, even when he never asked me the same, he held on to one truth tighter than anything else: that he was the father and I was the child. That I owed him, always. So I kept giving, time, money, space, but none of it was enough. Because what he wanted wasn't help, it was control. And when I stopped giving him that, when I finally pushed back, he slapped me. Not with the force of rage, but with the cold finality of someone who needed to remind me who held the power. And now I'm here, telling you this, not because I want pity or revenge, but because stories like mine don't get told out loud. They live in whispered phone calls, in quiet car rides, in the hollow eyes of women who learned too early how to survive without ever being seen. I was one of them. I guess I still am. But now I've decided I want more. Not just to survive, but to be free. When people talk about family, they often speak in soft tones: warmth, belonging, home. But for me, family was structure, and structure was survival. My father didn't build a home. He ran a command center. Every morning was a drill. Wake up by 6 a.m. Bed made military-style breakfast at exactly 6:30, oatmeal or eggs, nothing fancy. He hated noise, hated excuses more. And he believed that discipline solved everything. I wasn't allowed to join theater, or take art, or hang out after school. Waste of time, he said. You're not here to play. You're here to become something. Becoming something meant obeying. It meant suppressing every piece of myself that didn't fit his mold. When I brought home a drawing I was proud of in 5th grade, he looked at it for 3 seconds and then said, "Don't let your head get too big." That was the pattern. Achievements were tolerated. Mistakes were punished. Emotions were ignored. If I cried, he turned up the TV. If I asked questions, he gave one-word answers. My friends called their parents for advice or support. I memorized the sound of footsteps in the hall, knew how to read his moods by the way he closed a door. I learned to anticipate anger, to shrink myself before he had a reason to explode. He wasn't always cruel. Sometimes he was quiet. That was worse. Silence in our house was heavy like wet cement. I once got a B+ in chemistry and he didn't speak to me for 3 days. Not because he was disappointed in the grade, but because I had let my focus slip. In his world, excellence wasn't praised, it was expected. Anything less was failure. After my mother died, things hardened. The softness she brought, the way she'd sneak me cookies after dinner or hum while doing laundry, disappeared. Grief didn't soften him, it calcified him. He didn't cry at her funeral, just stood stone-faced, one hand on my shoulder like a soldier guarding a post. That night, I heard him in the garage drilling into the wall. I asked what he was doing. He said, making it safer. He built a cage of routine and called it protection. He never hit me without reason, he'd say. Just a slap to correct, just a shove to reset. You made me do this, he'd say. And I believed him. For years, I thought maybe I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. I remember once when I was 16, I stayed late at school to finish a design project. I'd been selected to present at a local showcase. I was so proud. I ran home blueprint in hand, eager to show him. I walked through the door and he didn't even look up, just asked why dinner wasn't ready. I hadn't cooked that night. I forgot. I was too excited, too young. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He just walked over, took the blueprint from my hand, and tore it in half, then said, Don't come home late again. That moment became a blueprint of its own, one that shaped every decision I made for years. Keep your head down. Don't ask for more. Don't outshine him. I graduated high school with honors. He didn't attend the ceremony, said he had a shipment at the store. When I won a local art contest, he told me not to get carried away. When I applied for a scholarship to a design school in Boston, I did it behind his back. I forged his signature, lied about where I was going. And when the acceptance letter came, I stared at it like it was forbidden fruit. Sweet, terrifying, mine. Leaving wasn't brave, it was necessary. I packed at night. I took only what I could carry, left the rest behind. I thought maybe he'd call. Maybe he'd try to stop me. But he didn't. And in that silence, I found my first taste of truth. I was never his daughter. I was his project. And projects aren't meant to grow. They're meant to be controlled. Boston didn't feel like freedom at first. It felt like survival in a different costume. I lived in a shared apartment with two other girls I barely knew, both working students like me. The walls were thin, the heater moody, and the kitchen sink always had something floating in it. But it was mine. I paid my rent with money from freelance jobs, designing logos, creating floor plays, editing Pinterest boards for overwhelmed mothers and struggling small businesses. During the day, I attended classes. At night, I worked at a local bookstore where the smell of old paper was the only thing that calmed me. I ate cheap food, reused notebooks, and learned how to stretch $10 across 3 meals. It was hard, exhausting, lonely, but it was real. And real even when difficult felt better than fake comfort back home. Slowly, my work began to get noticed. A boutique hotel asked me to redesign their lobby. A bakery needed a makeover. My name started circulating, not loudly, but enough that I could breathe between projects. I didn't tell my father about any of it, but I still sent him money, every month, quietly, dutifully. Sometimes 200, sometimes more. I justified it to myself as respect, as repayment. But in truth, it was guilt. That inherited bone-deep guilt that daughters carry even when they've been bruised into silence. Each payment felt like proof that I hadn't abandoned him, that I was still good, still loyal, still his. He never said thank you, not once. But when I called rarely, he'd mention how the fridge was stocked, or how the utility bills were somehow easier this month. I'd nod, say nothing. Let him believe it was luck. Let myself believe I was doing the right thing. Over the years, the apartment changed. I moved into my own place, a one-bedroom near South End, filled with light and thrift store furniture I refinished myself. The kitchen had blue cabinets I painted one weekend while listening to old soul music. There was a tiny balcony where I kept plants that I never remembered to water, but they forgave me anyway. Life stabilized. I took fewer side gigs, focused on bigger clients. I was never rich, but I wasn't scared of overdrafting anymore. I could buy groceries without mental math. I could rest. And yet every holiday I went back to the same house, the same kitchen, the same cold silence. I brought gifts, cooked meals, pretended like we were a family. He never hugged me, never asked about my work, just sat in his chair, made occasional remarks about the news or the government, and waited for the weekend to end. I kept going because I thought that's what daughters do. We show up, even when it hurts, even when the door never really opens. The last time I returned before the slap, I brought him a new recliner. His old one had broken, and I'd spent weeks researching models that would support his back better. I thought maybe it would matter, that maybe it would make him see me, not as defiant, not as a disappointment, just as me. It didn't. He barely looked at it, said the color was wrong, that it felt cheap. I smiled, sat down, bit my tongue. The routine was familiar, so familiar it felt like muscle memory. But something in me had started to shift. I didn't know it then, couldn't name it, but it was growing. A quiet rebellion, not the kind that screams or slams doors, the kind that simply stops pretending, the kind that finally asks, What if I'm not the broken one? I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But I felt it. That whisper, that question. And I think that's what scared him the most. Because he could sense that I wasn't asking for love anymore. I was asking for truth. And truth in our house was the one thing never allowed. It was supposed to be a quiet visit. I came home for the holidays like I always did. Arms full of groceries trunk, filled with wrapped gifts, heart cautiously hopeful. The roads had been icy, the drive long, but I made it back before sunset. The house looked the same, though a bit more worn. The porch light flickered, the shutters sagged slightly. Still, I smiled. Habit, maybe. Inside, I unpacked quietly, stocked the fridge, set the gifts under the modest tree I had set up the year before, and no one had taken down since. He was in his chair, half watching an old war documentary, mumbling about how they don't make soldiers like they used to. I didn't expect a welcome. I didn't need one. But I hoped just a little for a moment of ease. We ate dinner in silence. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. I had cooked. He hadn't commented. Halfway through the meal, I asked him how he was. He shrugged, asked me if I was still messing around with those pillows and curtains. I told him I'd signed a new client, a corporate office redesign. He scoffed. So you rearrange furniture for a living? I took a breath. Let it pass. Tried again. It's not about furniture. It's about how people feel in a space. He cut me off. People are soft. That's the problem. Always worried about how they feel, instead of what they're supposed to do. I nodded, swallowed my bite. I like making people feel safe, I said, because I didn't always. That was it. Just those words, honest, bare, but they hit like a challenge. He put down his fork, stared at me. You think you had it hard, he said. His voice rose steady and sharp. You think I didn't do my best? Feed you, clothe, you keep a roof over your head. You did what you thought was right, I said, calmly, firmly, but it hurt. His face changed, twisted. He stood. Don't talk to me like I'm some villain. You were a roof over my head away from the street. I'm not saying you were a villain, I said. I'm saying I needed more than what you gave. That's when it happened. Quick, unexpected. His hand across my cheek, open-palmed and hard. Not a slap out of blind rage, a deliberate act, a correction. The room stilled. Even the TV seemed to quiet. My cheek burned. My eyes didn't water. I just looked at him. And he said it not yelling now, but with the same cold precision he'd used to fold laundry to slice bread. You're ungrateful. Get out. And don't you ever come back. No one else was there. No witness, no buffer. Just me and him. And years of silence bursting open in a single moment. I stood up, picked up my coat, walked out. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut like the final line of a chapter I never wanted to reread. Boston greeted me with cold air and quiet streets. I parked in front of my apartment building just past midnight. The city was asleep, and for the first time so was my panic. I carried my bag upstairs, unlocked the door, and stepped into the calm. My apartment was still. The soft blue of the kitchen cabinets glowed faintly under the hallway light. My potted plant, slightly wilted, leaned toward the window like it had been waiting. I dropped my bag, took off my coat, and sat at the table without turning on a single light. The silence didn't scare me. It embraced me. That night I didn't cry. I didn't replay his words or question what I could have said differently. I didn't scroll through messages hoping for an apology that would never come. I made tea. I drank it slowly. I stared at the steam rising from the cup like it was speaking to me in a language only the broken understand. And then I went to bed. No calls, no texts, not from him, not from anyone else in town. The silence wasn't just absence, it was clarity. No one had followed me. No one had asked if I got home safe. For once there were no demands, no reminders to be smaller, to be obedient. I thought maybe I would feel empty, but I didn't. I felt weightless. In the following days, I returned to work like nothing had happened. Deadlines didn't care about family drama. My clients emailed. My calendar stayed full. I smiled when needed, delivered what was promised. But something inside me was shifting. Like a thread that had been stretched too far had finally snapped, and instead of fraying, I felt free. I stopped sending money. I didn't make a big decision about it. I just didn't. 1 month passed. Then 2. I expected the call, the accusation, the guilt, but it never came. The silence held. I began sleeping better, cooking more, laughing at old sitcoms without thinking of what I should be doing instead. I bought myself a proper chair for my desk, a splurge I never allowed before. I had always convinced myself that my comfort should come last, that there was virtue in self-denial. But now I saw the lie in that. I deserve softness, deserve peace, deserve to exist without having to earn it. I started going on walks in the evening, long ones, past parks and bookstores, through neighborhoods I used to dream about living in. I didn't need a reason. I just needed to move. One night during one of those walks, I passed by a father and daughter sitting on a bench sharing ice cream. She was laughing. He was wiping chocolate from her chin. And it didn't make me sad, it made me glad, because she would never have to learn the lesson I did, that love should not come with fear. That a house isn't a home if you're only welcome when you're useful. That silence can be sanctuary, not punishment. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not at first. Some stories need time to ripen before they're ready to be told. Mine was still unfolding. And in that unfolding, I found peace. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. Like the rhythm of my own breath, finally mine, finally enough. 3 months after I left on an unremarkable Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in a while. Raymond Carter. I didn't answer. I let it ring. Then another call came, then a text. Just one line. "Why haven't you sent the check this month?" I stared at it for a long time. Not out of anger, not even surprise. Just a quiet kind of exhaustion, like someone had asked me to clean up a mess they made and forgot I'd already done it 100 times before. I didn't respond. I set my phone down, poured myself a glass of water, and sat by the window. The city moved beneath me. People living their lives unaware that mine had just cracked open a little more. An hour passed, then another. When I finally checked again, there were more messages. One from him. 2 from a number I didn't recognize, his lawyer apparently. Another from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me I was tearing the family apart. I hadn't said a word to anyone. But somehow the story had begun to spread, rewritten without me. In their version, I was the cold one. The one who turned her back. The one who abandoned her poor father after everything he'd done. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one asked why I stopped. Just demands, accusations, and implications that I had somehow failed in my unspoken role as caretaker. The next day, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. A formal request from his attorney, financial support documentation, bank statements, and notice of intent to pursue legal acknowledgement of my obligation. I sat with that letter on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it. When I finally did, it didn't make me cry. It made me laugh. A dry, bitter laugh that sounded like something breaking clean in half. He was suing me, my own father, for money, for the support I had given freely for years, with no thank you, no recognition, just expectation. And now when the flow stopped, he decided to make it law. I opened my banking app, scrolled through every transfer I had sent over the past 4 years. Rent, groceries, electric bills, repairs. Over $38,000 in total. I remembered the months I'd skipped my own dentist appointments to make sure he had heating oil. The nights I stayed up finishing freelance projects just to cover his car repair. I called the utility companies, the grocery delivery service, the pharmacy. All had one thing in common. None of my payments had been applied in the past several months. I called the bank holding the mortgage, asked about the account. The woman on the line, polite but firm, told me the account had gone delinquent over 6 months ago, that no payments had been made from the usual source. I asked if someone else had stepped in. She said a few partial payments had come from an unknown third party, but nothing consistent. The house was in pre-foreclosure. I sat in silence, not shocked, not angry, just quiet. He hadn't just used my money, he'd wasted it, redirected it, lied about needing help while buying new gadgets. A recliner I hadn't bought, a fishing trip I saw tagged on someone's Facebook. He hadn't been struggling. He had been manipulating. And when that manipulation stopped working, he reached for the one thing he always relied on: control. But this time I wasn't 16. I wasn't scared. I wasn't willing to be silent. I made an appointment with a lawyer, gathered every receipt, every transfer, every bank statement, built a paper trail so strong it couldn't be ignored. And for the first time, I wasn't acting from guilt. I was acting from truth. He hadn't wanted a daughter. He had wanted a provider. And when I stopped playing that part, he tried to write me out of the script entirely. But he forgot something. I was no longer living in his house. I was no longer under his roof, his rules, his silence. I had built a life, a real one, and I wasn't going to let him bulldoze it out of spite. So I sent my response to his attorney, polite, clear, final. And then I blocked his number, not in anger, but in peace, because some ties aren't meant to be mended. Some are meant to be cut clean so something better can grow. A week after I sent the legal response, he called from another number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short, cold, and oddly formal. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I didn't reply. The next day, a cousin called, then another. They spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid to say too much. "He's really upset," one said. "You've hurt him," another added. I asked if they knew what he'd done. They didn't answer. Just fell back on old lines. "He's still your father. Family's complicated. You're being dramatic." I hung up on the last one. Then late one evening, my phone rang again. I was tired, worn thin from the noise. I answered. His voice was quiet, almost rehearsed. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," he said. "I just didn't expect you to cut me off like that." I stayed silent. Let him fill the space. "You embarrassed me," he said, tone rising slightly. "Calling the bank, making it public." I waited, then replied, "I didn't make it public. You did." "When you involve lawyers," he sighed like he was the victim, like I'd somehow broken a sacred trust. "This is tearing the family apart," he said. I almost laughed. "No," I said, calm but sharp. "This is the result of what's been broken for a long time." I just finally stopped pretending it wasn't. He said he needed help. Just this once, just until things stabilized. "I'm not your safety net," I replied. "I'm not your retirement plan." Then after a beat, he said it. The thing I knew was coming. "We're still family. This is still your home." I closed my eyes, took a breath. "No," I said. "It's a house, and I never really felt at home in it." He went quiet. I ended the call, not with anger, just certainty. The next morning, more messages came, this time angrier, accusatory, ungrateful, selfish, heartless. I didn't open them. I didn't respond. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the steam rise. My world hadn't ended. It had clarified. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation of peace, of truth, of self. I took out my old phone, the one I used during college, scrolled through years of messages, payments, apologies, efforts, all one-sided. I deleted them, not in spite, in finality. Then I changed the name of the old family group chat. From Carter House to closed account, archived it, muted every thread, and as the notifications kept buzzing, I felt nothing. No guilt, no fear, just stillness, the kind that only comes when you finally truly let go. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done, didn't post about it, didn't share it with friends. Some endings don't need announcements. They just need to happen, quietly, fully. I spent the next few weeks focusing on work. I poured myself into a new project for a women's shelter downtown, transforming an old, sterile space into something warm, safe, and dignified. Every choice I made felt symbolic. Curtains that softened light, chairs that embraced instead of scolded, colors that calmed. It was healing work. For them, for me. When the shelter director asked why I took the project on pro bono, I simply said, "Because everyone deserves a room that doesn't hurt." She didn't press. She just nodded like she understood something unspoken. One morning, a letter arrived, handwritten. My name scrawled in my father's handwriting on the envelope. No return address. No postage stamp. He had dropped it off himself, probably still thinking I'd open it. That guilt might work where threats had failed. I turned it over in my hands for a long time, not out of curiosity, but consideration. I wondered what it might say: a final plea, a last attempt at control, or worse, an apology too late and too shallow. I set it down on the counter, made breakfast, ate it slowly, watched the sun climb up the kitchen wall. Then, without drama, I tossed the letter in the trash. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't need to hear anything more from a voice that had never truly listened to mine. I wasn't angry, I wasn't mourning, I was done. That's the thing people don't understand about letting go. It doesn't always come with fire or fury. Sometimes it comes like a breath, like a door closing without sound, like peace so deep it surprises you. I took a walk later that day, down my usual route, through the park, past the little bookstore with the blue awning. The world looked the same, but I didn't feel the same inside it. Lighter, clearer, whole. When I got home, I opened my laptop and filed the paperwork to register my own design firm. My name, my vision, my terms. I called it Unafraid Studio, because that's who I wanted to be now. Not just free, but fearless. The next morning, I deleted the last of the old voicemails, one by one, each one a piece of a story that no longer needed retelling. And when the last one was gone, I didn't feel loss. I felt space. Beautiful, sacred space to become whatever I chose next. Not his daughter, not his scapegoat, just me. And that was more than enough. Some people hear my story and call it cold. They say I should have tried harder, that I should have forgiven, that family is everything. But those people never lived in a house where love had conditions, where silence was the only safe language, where obedience was mistaken for respect and fear was disguised as protection. I used to believe that blood was thicker than water. That being a good daughter meant enduring quietly, giving, endlessly staying no matter what. But what I've learned, what I've lived, is that real family doesn't hurt you for sport. It doesn't punish your independence. It doesn't call your boundaries betrayal. Real family sees you, loves you without a ledger, holds space for your truth, even when it's hard to hear. My father didn't want me to be strong. He wanted me to be silent. And when I stopped being silent, he called me ungrateful. But I am not ungrateful. I am unafraid, unapologetic, unavailable to people who only show up when they need something. And if that makes me selfish in their eyes, so be it. I have given enough, more than enough. And I'm done proving my worth to people who never bothered to learn my name beyond what I could do for them. There is a freedom in being done, in choosing yourself, in refusing to carry pain that doesn't belong to you anymore. I didn't leave because I stopped loving him. I left because he only loved the version of me that stayed quiet, paid the bills, and never asked for anything in return. And when that version stopped showing up, so did his idea of family. That's not love. That's dependency disguised as connection. So to anyone reading this, to the daughters who became mothers to their parents, to the women who kept giving until they had nothing left, to the people who stayed too long in houses, that only wanted their labor, their money, their silence, I want you to know something. You are not cruel for leaving. You are not ungrateful for saying no. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are just done. And that's okay. You don't need to explain. You don't need to convince anyone. The people who truly care won't need convincing, and the ones who demand explanations never really cared in the first place. Let them call you cold. Let them say you changed. Let them write their stories where you're the villain, because you know the truth. You were there, every day, every month, until you weren't. And now they can finally feel the silence they spent years pretending wasn't yours.